Okay, welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I'm your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. And I'm feeling so fantastic that I screwed up the intro the first time we tried to do it. We're taking you behind the curtain right away. So the celebratory beers are already cracked, but I'm telling you, my performance on the intro was so poor that we had to do it again. So let me just say, I got a celebratory beer. I believe Dino has one as well.
As do I.
I saw it. And so we're dedicating these beers, obviously, to the world champions. I think we're also dedicating these beers to the GOAT, silver medalist, Marta, on a great international career.
Love that.
And then thirdly, we're dedicating these beers to our pal, YouTube viewer, Blade Runner 1473, who
Hell yeah.
also told us in the YouTube comments, one of my favorite YouTube comments we've ever got, they like to watch the show and crack a cold beer with us out of solidarity. Let me tell you, solidarity is the name of the game for all folks like us. So Blade Runner, appreciate you. Thanks for rocking with us. Thanks for staying hydrated with us while you watch the program. And with all that said, I think we have some football to discuss.
We absolutely have some football to discuss. I'm not sure if I need to ask you, but I'll do it anyway. Mr. Grant Engel, big day. Your boy's feeling festive.
I see.
I'm rocking my USA shirt that I actually picked up on the day of the 2015 Women's World Cup final.
Let's go.
A little tighter than I remember, but still fits.
We've all been there.
With that said, where do you want to get started?
United States of America 1, Brazil 0.
That's right.
Your Olympic champion, gold medalists, U.S. women's national team.
Let's go. Some twists and turns in this one. I think the fatigue kind of was a factor early. The speed was a factor early. I think maybe the pressure of this final was a factor early. I want to start by checking in on how you experienced Brazil's super hot start.
Yeah, they came out of the gates firing, and I thought there was reason for some concern for the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how Brazil was not scared at all of Spain. And they were carrying that with them into this match very clearly. When you saw the lineups and Rose Lavelle was out of there, you're like, okay, you have Albert back there. It looked like you were going to kind of play two defensive midfielders with Coffey and Albert, with Horan kind of pushed upfield as a 10. There's a double-edged sword there of maybe you give a little extra support in defense, but now you might not hold the ball as well, and Brazil's going to run right at you in full attack mode. And that's how they did, especially in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, that was pretty intense. I mean, what they were doing. And I think you started to see some of the fatigue, especially as it pertained to the U.S. defense. I think Gurma, Davidson, even Crystal Dunn. There was just a lot of it's always tricky, right? Especially coming off playing a team like Germany, playing a team like Brazil, totally different styles.
Yeah.
This was mentioned on the telecast a couple different times that Brazil had cycled through a lot of different lineups. Mm-hmm. The U.S. much, much, much less so. I think we definitely saw that early. Brazil firing early. I think that trio of Ludmila, Jennifer, Gabi Portillo, they were they were a step faster.
Yeah.
I think that might have been Artur Elias's strategy. Let's start fast, let's jump ahead. They ended up with a 60-40 possession advantage over the course of the game. I think outshot the U.S. more shots on target as well, if I recall correctly. Ludmila had that one, got called back for an offsides. I mean, it was pretty clear, but it seemed like Brazil was probably more likely to score. And I think that start, even though when you think about it tactically, makes a ton of sense, caught me off guard.
Yeah, and they mentioned it on the broadcast. I think it was Julie Foudy. It might have been later in the match that she mentioned it, but we talked about Spain and their tired legs. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it a lot during this tournament. The fixtures were coming fast and furious. You didn't have a ton of time to rest, but then you kind of start thinking about okay, Dunn's a veteran. She's played a lot of minutes. Mm-hmm. Naomi Gurma, while young, has played every single minute of every single match of this tournament. This would be a bad time for her to look a little slow. And you're right. She still rates. I mean, we're not going backwards off of one half of football or whatever. Still the best center back in the world. Still one of the best players in the world. Those first 15 minutes, she did look a little slower than Ludmila and some of the other strikers there. So that was a little nervous hours there at first, but I felt like they kind of started to, and you could probably even stretch it out to the first 30. I think Brazil looked like they had more energy. they're going to be in more of an attack mode. You talked about the possession disparity. Just in the first half, they had 8 shots to the U.S. only having 2, and 3 of those shots were on target. Now, both of USA's shots were on target, but Brazil had the better chances. They had more possession. They had more passes, obviously. They were really kind of pushing the pace, but I felt like, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, it felt like after the hydration break, I don't think USA took back all the momentum, but it felt like they were able to like scrape back some of it.
I'll tell you what, buddy, nobody hydrates like the U.S.
That's right.
Seeing Germa in the spin cycle early, that was scary. But I think you're right. I think it was a confluence of a couple different things. Brazil wanted to start fast, maybe couldn't uphold that level of intensity the entire first half. That was a lot. That's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
And then I think even though there are some young players on this U.S. team, these are veterans. These are like professional footballers, that play on some of the biggest teams in the world. You knew they were going to catch up to the speed of the game. So wasn't surprised about that. What I was surprised about was during the first half, kind of felt like the U.S. lacked patience. A little bit of scramble mode and, trying to push where there wasn't really an opportunity. Like there was one moment where U.S. earned a free kick, probably 10 yards inside the halfway line, where the way the game's going, you might want to just put that one down and let Nair like take a whack at it and just kind of get it upfield. They took it quickly. It was like 1 or 2 passes and then they gave it away. I'm like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? So I think there was a little bit of nerves, a little bit of panic, a little bit of trying to like maybe match the speed, the acceleration and the velocity of like the way Brazil was playing, which maybe wasn't exactly the right call there. But I think the hydration break helped. I think the halftime break also helped.
Yeah, totally. I'll say quickly out of that hydration break, it wasn't long after that. There's a ball that gets played in and Lorena goes, I think she either gets a punch on it or she pushes it away and Swanson smashes into her. And, she was going for the ball. I don't think it was totally dirty, but I don't think it was totally on accident either. It felt a little message sendy to me.
Yeah, that one was right around the 35th minute. And I wrote in my notes, Lorena takes a shot from Swanson. Looked a little tactical.
There we go. That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And yeah, shout out to Lorena, man. I think she continues to or I guess now that the tournament's a wrap, I mean, she was a warrior all the way through. I mean, she clearly has got something going on in the midsection because like she almost was bracing for that hit.
Yeah.
And you can see the grimace kind of like hit her face almost instantly when Swanson makes contact. And yeah, she gutted it out, had some big time saves too. Definitely not the reason they lost.
No.
Great tournament for her. But yeah, I definitely appreciated the craftiness of that little extra aggression.
Yeah, totally. And so then they come out of halftime, and I think you nailed it earlier. You had said you thought the halftime break helped them too. The first 15 minutes out of halftime, I felt like the attack looked significantly better. The through balls seemed like they were a little more dangerous. The movement was a little better. People kind of making themselves available for passes. And then we get the goal. Corbin Albert plays a through ball. And honestly, I'm not sure if she played it through to Mallory Swanson or Sophie Smith, but she put it in that area, made the pass that she needed to make. And then we get our little bit of controversy. So I want us to get to that. But, basically we know what happened. Swanson runs onto it. Smith stays away. And then Swanson, just cool as you like, tucks it away, is able to draw Lorena a little bit to Lorena's right and then slide it past her left, broadside of the goal to side netting. The question is, Dino De Cespedes, should it have counted?
I think in the moment, felt offsides. I was just kind of like, And then I think the way that everybody kind of slowed up a little bit, and it just felt like it was one of those after the whistle type feels to it.
Yeah.
Thought it was a little funky that we didn't really get the offsides digital, line thing until maybe like a good 5-10 minutes after that.
Yeah, I think so.
So I thought it was super close. What was your take on it?
So, okay, everybody knows I obviously moonlight as a goalkeeping expert and try to decide how Ann Katzenberger should play goalkeeper. So now I'm going to be an armchair referee expert. Okay, so I think the crux of the controversy is Albert plays the ball through, and it's pretty much in between Swanson and Smith. Sophie Smith, when the ball is played, is pretty clearly in an offside position. Mallory Swanson is not. Now, they both kind of start to converge on the ball, and then Smith peels away and Swanson runs onto it. And that's where you see Tarciane and a lot of the other defenders start raising their hand and yelling offside. You get that kind of after the whistle feel like you described. Now, the argument is typically, and we saw this with, I think it was Chelsea Ajax with Lauren James, where she's way offside and she kind of dekes a little bit at the ball, but isn't really in the play enough, and kind of like freezes a defender. And I think it might have been Nuskin who scored. That's kind of the argument here, is that Sophie Smith impacted the way the defenders would have played the ball, therefore making her part of the play, ruling the play offside if that's what the ref had ruled. But I think when they show that zoomed out view of it, I don't think any of the Brazilian defenders are necessarily that close to either Smith, Swanson, or the ball. And so I don't know how much of an impact Sophie Smith really had on the defenders. And so I'd like to hear whatever the referee or the VAR officials or whatever, like, I'd like to hear their explanation. But if I had to guess why they said it stood as a goal, it's probably because they would say Sophie Smith did not impact the play, because the defenders, they didn't really even have to change their route because they were so far away. They were making the same route to try to cut off Swanson anyway.
I mean, I think that's ultimately what they ruled, right? You know, it's one of those right on the, maybe it's not even right on the borderline, but if it would have been called offsides, I don't know that anybody's raising too much of an eyebrow.
Yes.
What did you think? I want to, now that we're on ref talk, I want to rewind a little bit. What did you think on Dunn's foul on Adriana, like a foot or two inside the box early? Because that one felt hard to see how that wasn't a foul.
I've seen less called for a penalty kick. That was a big holding of breath for me. Mm-hmm. As soon as it happened, I was like, oh boy. And, I'm guessing they're looking at that as incidental, or just like two players kind of getting their feet tangled up. But like I said, I've seen a lot less called as a penalty.
Same. I mean, I think that one probably was a penalty. I do kind of feel like when the ref is kind of quick to like restart play, just kind of like, all right, nothing to see here. That usually bodes pretty poorly for for the aggrieved, right? So I was just kind of like, oh, this is probably not going to be good for Brazil. I also thought early, like John Champion was talking about, oh, Brazil had these chances and they needed to cash in on these chances. In the moment, it didn't feel like that.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I think they were right. I think those chances, they probably needed 1, 2 would have been amazing. They were clearly in kitchen sink territory. I don't think the subs that Elias brought on outside of Marta were any kind of effective, like a little bit later in the match.
Yeah.
I think he was like, all right, we're going to hit him early. We're going to kind of have like a big wave of subs a little bit later. Then we're going to hit him again. That hit him again part just didn't totally pan out. But again, credit to Brazil. They put the heat on the USA big time. And I wanted to ask you this. Fatigue notwithstanding, was Brazil the toughest team that the USA played in this tournament?
Ooh, it's a great question. It's got to be between them, Germany, and Japan. So they played Germany twice. Kind of ran out ahead in that one. Japan took them to extra time. But, Japan barely had the ball. Yeah, I would say if I had to pick, I think Brazil was their toughest opponent in this tournament. And I'm glad you framed the question. You really got me thinking. Brazilian supporters should be thrilled with that.
Hell yeah. I also wrote my notes. I'm like, Brazil's coming.
Yeah.
They remind me so much of like Portugal, Benfica, where the skills are there, like the IQ is there. Physically, I think the speed and athleticism is there, but I think when it comes to like conditioning and like just strength, like outside of Ludmila, I think I wrote in my notes, she wiped out, I think, Corbin Albert on a collision, and I'm like, she looked like prime Zeke Elliott.
Nice.
So I think she's a tank, and there's some really, really great athletes, but I think once they get to that strength and conditioning level of maturity, this team is going to be awesome. Like they're just going to be awesome.
I can't remember. I'll have to go back and look. But there was a person on Twitter who was kind of lamenting. It might have been our pal Mad Dog. I'll go back and look.
Shout out Mad Dog.
Yeah, Mad Dog's the best. Somebody was lamenting Marta, kind of a victim of a circumstance where it's like, if she was born 15 years or like 20 years later, could you imagine 19-year-old Marta coming up with this group of players?
I mean, who knows? I mean, there are some players on that Brazilian side that I'm just like, this might be one of those. I mean, maybe Marta types is like a little tricky, but there are definitely going to be some absolute world-class players they've got on their squad. And I think Julia Belastriniraj was saying that this generation was like the first generation to have like under 19, under 17.
Yep.
Just football, like, just like being able to like play organized and kind of get involved in some of these tournaments. So I think it's going to start paying off big time. And Julia also talked to us about the expectations for this Brazilian side coming to the tournament. They weren't silver medal, I'll say that.
No.
I didn't go back and replay that whole episode or read the whole transcript, but it wasn't that. It was like, hey, well, let's get out of the group stage, especially after what happened in last summer's World Cup. So this has to be an incredible achievement for this great footballing nation. I mean, I think hard to see how it doesn't just kind of elevate from here.
Yeah, totally. And, I love this game. So, I mean, Jennifer, 22, Yaya, 22, Sampaio, 23, Lauren, 21, Tarciane, 21, Angelina, 24, Priscilla, 19.
That's basically a 23 and under team.
Yeah.
Like, this is a youth movement that's making a lot of noise. Like, I mean, they pushed the United States to the brink in a final. And this is a team that we've seen them kind of melt down a little bit in the past. Obviously great footballing nation, but you rewind back to the 23 World Cup, this is a completely different frequency for this squad. I mean, this is now this feels like it's got to be a top 5, top 6 country in the world at this point, maybe perpetually now going forward. I don't know. I was incredibly, incredibly impressed with this performance. And I'm just like, this team is at the level. Let me ask you this question. Which team played better today?
Oh, wow. You tricky son of a bitch. I like possession football. I think on balance, though, I think USA did a little better with their chances. And I think if, let's say the Swanson goal gets ruled offside in the 57th minute, I think she scored. We'll talk more about that later.
Hell yeah, we will. Actually, let's run the clip. How about a score prediction? I know it's early. I know it's been a long day.
I'm going to do 1-0 USA.
Let's go.
I think the goal comes between the 60th and the 75th minute. And I think it's a Mallory Swanson goal. Let's get that in there. So yeah, not quite between 60 and 75, but your boy says a lot of stuff. Sometimes gets things correct. But with that said, if let's say the Swanson goal gets ruled offside, I think USA finds a way to score again. So I will say,
I agree with that.
I think USA probably on balance played a little better, but your point stands, not by much at all.
I hate that I put you in that spot, but that was a question that I wrote down in my notes. I'm like, did Brazil play better this? I racked my brain over. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it to you the same way I did it to myself. So I appreciate you playing along with me.
Of course.
Let's switch over to the USA. Lot to be excited about. If you were to make the argument that the USA was the better squad today, obviously they win. I think defensively, after a little bit rocky start, we saw German spin cycle, Tierna Davidson in spin cycle a couple times, Crystal Dunn having her difficulties. This defense really settled down, really got up to speed. Alyssa Nair, another monster performance. I mean, wrist game on 100.
Strong.
When it gets to winning time, I'm not sure there's a player you'd want more, on the pitch in a high leverage moment. And I thought about something that I talked about with regard to Naomi Girma, I think last episode or maybe the one prior, where I'm like, Girma's like having a second goalkeeper.
Right.
And I think Girma was pulled out into a lot of the action, and some of those saves were just Nair against the striker, and it's just like, let's see how this goes. The Adriana header, that Nair just gets a paw on, and I was locked into the wrist. The wrist did not move. It was just
strong.
I mean, it might as well have just been made out of concrete. Just incredible play from Alyssa Nair.
Yeah, I mean, Nair keeps coming up big in these really big spots. So now we have, just in the span of a few months, think about the W Gold Cup, where Nair makes the stop in the penalty shootout versus Canada and then knocks home the penalty and is kind of the hero in that situation. Her performance against Germany, the performances really throughout this tournament. And then today in the gold medal winning match is, with those 2 or 3 saves in particular that you referenced. Just a big game player that you need back there. And I felt like what we were talking about with Girma and Davidson, I thought Albert had some really tricky defensive moments, if you want to call them that, early in the match as well. They all kind of rebounded, though. We talked about the hydration break, halftime break. Yep. They all really tightened up in the second half.
Yeah, nobody hydrates like the U.S. women's national team.
That's what we do.
Dust off my Chris Berman impression. I'm glad you brought up Corbin Albert. Was surprised to see her in the lineup. We obviously talked about that at the top. I thought her and Lindsay Horan were kind of totally miscast in where they were playing on the field. Lindsay Horan, obviously USWNT legend at this point.
Sure.
She captains a squad that wins the gold medal at the Olympics. That's forever.
Yep.
I mean, and like, she's a max level competitor.
Yeah.
She's always just doing everything that needs to be done. She's got her limitations. I think that kind of elevates her a little bit. But I thought in this one specifically, Corbin Albert having some trouble defensively, dealing with some of the Brazilian creativity.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, Lindsey Horan playing in an advanced position was like kind of like a non-threat. Like there was one play where Swanson's on a breakaway and like Swanson, she's like, maybe there's something here. I'm going to push it. She looks to her right. The only person running with her is Lindsey Horan. And she just kind of is like, all right, this isn't going anywhere. Let's just hold it up. And I'm just kind of like, I think maybe the future of this team might feature Lindsey Horan a little deeper. And then I think Corbin Albert, like up a little higher. She almost chipped Lorena, could have put this one out of reach. I mean, she wasn't too far off. And I think every time I think about Corbin Albert, having a positive impact on the game, it's usually offensively. It's like
pretty much
her running, her driving, her striking. She struggled a little bit. So I'm going to be interested to see how Emma Hayes handles that midfield going forward, because there were some question marks coming into the tournament. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure we answered a bunch of those questions. Sort of doesn't matter. Scoreboard, gold medal, it's in the books. But I think that's something to watch going forward here.
Yeah, totally. I think that's perfectly said, man. Like, miscast. I'm glad you used that exact word. That's kind of how it felt. And the midfield was the weakest part of the squad throughout this entire tournament. We're saying this about the team that won the gold medal, obviously. Like you said, the results speak for themselves. But I think you're totally right. I don't think a lot of questions were answered. But I think one thing that's going to get very, very interesting is eventually Kat Macario is going to come back. Mm-hmm. And then Croy Bethune is going to get more time in the NWSL, and she's going to gain trust on this national team. I would bet, give me every dollar of stock that I could possibly buy in Croy Bethune stock. I will take it all. And then we have that teenager over in the Netherlands who might make this midfield awfully crowded. And I use the word awfully crowded, but in a very, very positive way.
Positively crowded. Mm-hmm. I like that. Totally agree with you. I mean, is this like quintuple espresso, sextuple espresso? I mean, how much espresso can one fan take watching this team? I definitely agree with you. I think it also kind of depends on what style Emma Hayes kind of envisions for this team.
Yeah.
Because I was actually surprised, almost no Neiswanger.
Yeah.
Or Nischwanger.
Nice.
To quote our guy. And that was very noticeable, like in terms of like how we were attacking. I think we've seen Neiswanger push the ball up the left-hand side, work those crosses in a la Abasha or Karshawi.
Yeah.
Or Carmona. And we just kind of didn't get that. And I think that's an excellent player, sort of buried a little bit for Crystal Dunn. Ultimately, Emma Hayes, I mean, like, if we're shouting out people that deserve a little extra credit, I mean, I think she's right at the top of that list. She nailed it roster-wise. Even managing some of the injuries, like springing up kind of all over the place, and she's got to move the pieces pretty much with every match. I think even in this match when Davidson comes off for Sonnet, there was a play where Porcilio like kind of cooks her, on a ball over the top, wins the aerial, and Davidson works her way back into the play, ends up stuffing the chance. I think she gets pulled a couple minutes later for Sonnet. And then you're just like, damn, that's a fucking gamer right there to be able to come out, withstand that early onslaught, settle into the game through injury, gold medal match, and really just be at the level, defensively. As a defensive unit, they really figured some stuff out second half of that match. And when she came off, an intense level of gratitude for me. I mean, she really, really gave it her all this tournament. But yeah, back to Emma Hayes, a lot of moving parts to handle. And she's still just 60 days into the job, some ridiculously low number.
Crazy.
And, now she's in the history books.
It was really cool to see how overcome with joy she was in the post-match. She talked about how she came to America and worked in club football because some of those opportunities, didn't yet exist, like in the WSL. So for her to kind of talk about the impact America has had in like the footballing culture that all goes back to those 99ers and even, Michelle Akers in 91, like the OGs, like how that set off these series of dominoes to now you have Emma Hayes, probably the class manager in the women's game and one of the class managers in all of world football, regardless of gender. Now she's here. Now she's coaching this team with this superlative amount of talent and this crazy amount of very young talent. And so this is one of those things where you win a title and you're ahead of schedule. they're the 15 Warriors right now for in the NBA. Like, where it's like, okay, like you didn't think you were going to be good enough to get this one. Now you got it. Now what else can you rattle off? Now, somebody could also make the same argument because Spain's program, even though Spain, was such a footballing power traditionally, they felt a little ahead of schedule and they won the damn World Cup in 2023 and they have a lot of young players. So now we have these two absolute, it looks like they're going to be two titans moving forward. But then you talked about Brazil. We've talked about Colombia. We've talked about the young talent that Germany has. We've talked about good young players in Canada. This is going to be an era that if Emma Hayes and the U.S. women's national team is able to kind of define, if they are the team of the next 10 years, it will be a massive accomplishment because there's just so much talent everywhere. And you still could probably make an argument that the U.S. might have the most.
I agree with half of that.
All right.
I think where it kind of breaks down for me, I think back to the beginning of this tournament, right? And then obviously we're looking at, all right, USA, Spain. That's kind of my dream matchup. I would love to see that. And quick sidebar, what did we do? What did we do that was so wrong that we couldn't get USA, Spain, and Brazil versus Germany? How did we get that wrong? I think the whole world kind of wanted that. I digress. I came into this tournament thinking, okay, USA and Spain are the class. France is sort of like they're the home country, super talented, and there's some couple other interesting squads: Germany, Colombia, Brazil, etc., etc. Japan also in there.
Sure.
Now I leave this tournament thinking I don't know what to expect at this next global tournament because you look at Brazil, who looked fucking awesome throughout the knockout stage, just embarrassed the World Cup champion Spain, pushed the USA to the absolute brink, and then you rewind back like 11 days and they squeaked by Nigeria 1-0. Right. It was like a good squad, and like they got beat by Spain and they get beat by Japan. And then you look at this US team knockout stage, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. Not exactly what we're used to, watching the big bad USWNT. So I'm of the opinion that it's an incredible feat to have won this, but we're entering a period where I don't know would you be shocked if I said, okay, I don't know, Colombia won the World Cup in 27. I don't know. There's 3 years between now and then. A lot can happen. Yeah. There might be another Linda Caicedo behind Linda Caicedo, that we don't know about. And I think like Mayra Ramirez is still not yet 25 years old. So let me fact check that. My bad. Quick fact check. Mayra Ramirez is 25, turned 25 in March.
Close.
Happy belated, Mayra. So when you think about where the sport is going, I don't think we're going to see this. I think it's going to be a little bit akin to the men's game where it's like we're going to cycle through great teams and great managers and little eras where there's like extended periods of success. But I don't know, just watching this US team, and I think they're also in an interesting space roster-wise because there are a lot of vets. There are a lot of players in their like mid-20s in their prime or post-prime or however you want to think about that. And there's a lot of young talent, right? So I think that this U.S. roster is going to look very different going forward here as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're right. And I think when I look at it of like which team is going to kind of like not really dominate the era, but like be the first team that you think of. It might be, and I'm going to, again, mix up some NBA metaphors and not even just do a team, but like you kind of look at the back half of the LeBron years of the NBA. They're now firmly the LeBron and Steph years. Like they really can't separate them at this point. So
that's right.
I think the way you articulate it makes a lot of sense of like, it could be USA, Colombia, Canada, Brazil battling it out over on this side of the world. And then over in Europe, it's just a knockdown drag out between England, Spain, Germany, France. You never know if Norway's going to bubble up again. You already know they got a ton of great talent over there. So I think it depends on who wins the World Cup and who wins the gold medals. Like who wins the Euros, who wins the Gold Cup. Like these are the measurements for these things. And I think you're probably right. We'll probably see a good mix, but if you're able to nick a couple of those, let's say Spain wins the next Euros, or maybe more likely, maybe England wins their second consecutive Euro and then wins the World Cup. Then now England is the team, right? Like, you never know how it's going to work.
Absolutely. And I think the main thing that I'll take away from this tournament is 2023 now feels like an eternity ago.
Sure.
It feels like the whole footballing world is kind of completely flipped upside down. You had Germany, Brazil, Canada, the United States all kind of flame out really early. Then you've got like the Spain and England in the final, Colombia really deep. You've got France a little bit in turmoil. I mean, who knows? France could be one of those teams where maybe they find their Emma Hayes.
Sure.
So I think there's going to be a lot to keep an eye on. I want to kick it back to you, though. Were there any other players that kind of stood out in this one with regard to maybe going up a level, going up half a level, which is really, really tough to do this deep into a tournament in this short a period of time? And then you add on top of that gold medal stakes.
You talk about Emma Hayes pulling the right levers and making the right substitutions. You got to have Emily Sonnet on the roster to make those substitutions. She's a legend at this point. I mean, different degrees of legendary players, but Sonnet being a key player. Okay, Davidson goes down, I'll step right in as a center back. Or you need me to play defensive mid, I'll step right in and do that. Davidson starts to kind of come back health-wise. Okay, Tierna, you give us 45 minutes versus Germany. Boom, Emily can take us home the rest of the way. I think you put it really well, too. Davidson could give you 74 minutes in this one. Okay, Emily, take us home. Sonnet had a key moment like relatively late in the match where she kind of pokes the ball away to get it out of danger, and then it just comes back around for the header right before the strong wrist action from there. But that was a moment where you had a player who could have been on. And Sonnet just gets there. Perfect timing, perfect positioning, just a constant motor from Sonnet, a level of toughness that she provides. Every time I watch her play, I only got her for one season here with the Seattle Reign, but just so consistent is the word I come up with her every single time you put her on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely falling more and more in love with her game and just kind of like what she brings to this team.
Yeah.
A utility player is way, way, way underselling it. This is a great player that just happens to be able to play in multiple different spots. And I think imagine going from Davidson to Sonnet and there's relief. You're like, oh, wow. Okay. Now well, all right. Davidson made it. And now Sonnet's in to just hold it down, kind of like keep that unit together and keep the clean sheet. I thought that was incredible. A couple more players I want to shout out here. I think that right-hand side, Emily Fox, I think she was awesome.
Whole tournament.
Trinity Rodman, awesome.
Yep.
I would have loved to see. I actually wrote in my notes, I wanted to see more early up that right-hand side with those two, because I think they were a little bit of a matchup nightmare. Trinity, like whenever she was on the ball, I mean, she was a highlight reel, and I think Fox was super solid as well. Tough to deal with. I mean, she's super athletic. She's good on the ball. And I think maybe, tough to say because the game was a little bit in a blender the first 55, 60 minutes before it gets broken open. But I thought Fox was great. Thought Rodman was great. And yeah, I think that U.S. attack, to your point, once they kind of figured out, all right, where the opportunities were and Brazil starts to run out of steam a little bit, that's like sort of that back pocket thing. It's like, all right, we still got those three up front.
Yep.
And you never know where it's going to come from. And it's just so funny that the goal is like, a little bit of a Smith offsides dummy to Swan, and then the Swanson kind of takes it, runs with it, and then finishes it. Lorena, no chance on that one. I mean, it was just a professional finish. You give Swanson that kind of space, that kind of look, and it's pretty much a wrap. So yeah, I think all in all, very memorable. And I think both of these teams earned their medals today.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Brazil just has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, the complete opposite. They should be super proud. Like you talked about the expectations going into this tournament. You talked about the adversity that they had to face. They beat France, Spain, and then went to the wire with the USA.
Insane.
So that's a pretty good run. So, they should be absolutely thrilled with that. They should be feeling very positive about the future. I think one other player I do want to reference, and I realized she came on relatively late, but she still she had to get like 10 plus minutes. I thought Casey Kruger comes on to just kind of see the game out. And she just had a couple moments where she's taken the ball away and then she's shepherding the ball down the side. She's like on the offensive end in the corner, killing time, just using her speed and intelligence. Kruger is just another one of those players on the defensive side for this USA team that you just put in and you just don't have to worry about. You're not like, okay, Dunn is too tired. We have to put in Casey Kruger. You are excited to put Casey Kruger in the match, and you should be.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think if you got the first 10 or so minutes of the pod, I let my curls down, let my hair down, Championship Saturday, in honor of Casey Kruger. Beautiful flowing curls on Casey as well. Shout out to you. She's another player, like a zero worry type sub.
Yeah.
I kind of hate to pick we'll get to Germany, Spain a little bit later, but they don't have that same freedom over there. Some of those subs that come on defensively, a little bit of a drop off. So definitely feels great to be able to bring on players of that caliber. It's going to be really interesting to see what this roster looks like.
Yeah.
I can see this team going a little bit younger and then also going a little bit more stylistically aligned with Emma Hayes, how she wants to coach. Quick shout out to Emma Hayes, too. Looked incredible in the sports coat. Gold medal fit today. She was on her full Pat Riley shit today, like a true champion.
I knew there was a Riley reference coming here eventually.
Oh, I almost went Sonnet Udonis Haslam, but I kind of decided against it. But now here we are. I got it out of my system.
Good. No, as it should be. I'm going to put you on the spot here for a brief moment. I'm going to ask you to tap into the memory banks. I'm going to ask you a question about the CONCACAF W Gold Cup.
Let's go.
Do you remember who won the award for best player in that tournament?
Was it Jaden Shaw?
It was Jaden Shaw, who hardly saw time on the pitch in this tournament. I mean, obviously had like some injury woes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she made an appearance in the knockout stage. 0 minutes against Japan, 0 against Germany, 0 against Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
And she's still really good. And I'm holding all the Jaden Shaw stock that we had previously purchased. We're hold on that. Like, I'm not getting rid of that. Emma Hayes has a lot of configuring to do with this massive talent, but it could be worse.
I totally agree with that. I mean, definitely a good problem to have. A lot of good players kind of left off this roster too. So yeah, that'll be something that we keep an eye on. Tom Cruise. What the fuck?
I didn't want to keep an eye on. What are we doing with this guy? Why were there so many camera shots of him?
I don't know. And who's he saying hi to? He's saying hi to everybody. Like he's just like, yeah, hey. Like, just like,
yeah.
I wrote in my notes, there's got to be a Mission Impossible coming out in a few weeks. There's no other explanation for this. Also, were him and Rapinoe the only two famous people in this game?
I guess. I thought it was weird too, and maybe I missed it. Rapinoe was sitting with Tobin Heath and Ali Krieger, and I don't know. I don't know if I missed if they all three got a mention. I do remember one camera shot where like half of Tobin Heath was in it and Ali Krieger was not in it, and I was like, well, hold on, guys. Come on now. Like, they're World Cup winners too. Like, they're great players. Like, what are we doing here? Like, obviously, shout out to Rapinoe. But, like, come on. The camera work. Less Tom Cruise. Just that off top. And if you're going to give me more Rapinoe, make sure you're getting Tobin Heath and Ali Krieger in there as well, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the shot too. Now that we're talking about producer cameraman talk, I love the shot of the German national team where all of them are on their phones at the same time. Half of them had to be watching us talking to Vicey,
obviously.
On our last episode, we saw a nice spike, during the 70-80 minute mark. So it must have been that.
We got 22 views all at the same time.
All geographically centered around the Paris area, for sure. Mm-hmm. Speaking of this German side, shout out to them. I mean,
amazing.
They obviously played extremely well, played the USA very tough, went into this bronze medal matchup, taking on Spain, sort of running on fumes a little bit. I want to hit this one really quickly because they got to be pumped over there in Germany. Oh, yeah. Footballing nation, another country with a disappointing World Cup last summer. Expectations, I don't quite think were bronze, medals was probably in the mix there. Once you draw Spain in the bronze medal match, I mean, it's a you look at those four teams, it's gonna be a tough draw either way. But they come out on top in this bronze medal match. Germany won, Spain 0. What did you see in this one?
I want to shout out friend of the program. I apologize if I'm butchering your YouTube display name. I think it's Musaitama. I am sorry if I'm butchering that. Please hop if you don't mind, just leaving a little comment. Let me know how to refer to you, please. But they were in our YouTube comments holding Montserrat Tomei accountable for her lineup choices.
Let's go. Hot seat.
Yeah, and I think Musaitama was right for doing that. We talked about Alexia not getting enough playing time versus Brazil. Tomei corrected that this time. They started Alexia, but they still started Abellera over Patri, which I don't know if Patri has some kind of nagging physical thing or not. Tomei played Hernandez over Olga at left back. I thought those were kind of questionable. But overall, I think Spain still did a lot of the Spain stuff. They were pretty creative. They did those. You nailed it last time we were chatting about them, and you talked about they make those kind of like runs in unorthodox directions. They're still doing that. They're still playing the 1-2s. There were some good 1-2s with like Bonmati and Hermoso and Battier involved. It was just they were doing it, but like maybe a step or a step and a half slower than they usually do. They dominated possession, but they only really seemed to kind of ratchet up the attacking part of that possession in the last phases of each half. And I wonder how much of that was attributed to they looked kind of dead on their feet out there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's such a haul to kind of get all the way through. It's wild. I mean, every single team got hit with injuries or substitutions, changes they had to make.
Yep.
This tournament was brutal on these players. They absolutely have to do something next time around. We've talked about it at length on this show. I was like, maybe should 4 teams make the knockout stage, but they got to get rid of one of the games.
Yeah.
6 games in 16, 17 days it's absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you can't go past 5 games. You got to figure out a way to make that happen. You got to expand the rosters. You got to probably limit the travel. This is a little silly to have these players flying across France, and this could be like a couple hours on a plane. And I think it showed on the field a little bit. This wasn't the Spain that we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
Zooming in, though, to Spain, I think they're going to have to figure out something at the forward spot, because the thing that we were worried about absolutely came to pass. I think the closest they might have gotten outside of the Alexia penalty was Aitana's strike from outside the box, from the midfield, that rocks the bar.
The crossbar.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's their best chance to score. And that's tough to do, to be able to just count on those strikes from distance. It could also be attributed to teams kind of catching up with what they're doing tactically. Those 1-2s that we were talking about. Once you've seen, it definitely felt like it caught everybody off guard at the World Cup. Nobody knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
But now it feels, they don't feel as unbeatable. It's funny, you think back to that loss to Czechia in the qualifiers.
Yeah.
That ended up, we're like, does this mean something? Probably doesn't mean anything. Turns out, didn't not mean nothing.
There we go.
So I think Spain's going to have a little bit of retooling to do, maybe less so strategically, tactically, maybe personnel. They're going to need to figure out how they're going to score, because the scoring is coming a little difficult for as good a team as that is. Obviously, a Jenny Hermoso getting up there in age as well. You might not expect her to be at the next World Cup.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a team to track, and I think the Euro's coming up soon. We staked our claim in the fact that we're going to be out there next summer, so you already know what time it is. Let's see what Spain's going to have for us when your boys touch down in Switzerland next summer.
I'll certainly be excited to see it. I don't think there's any kind of demise heading their way, and I don't think you're saying that either.
No, definitely not.
I think this will be a good opportunity for them to get some rest, kind of reset. Think about load management, as is so popular in sports now, in their league season, and how to kind of just manage this grueling schedule as women's football kind of starts to expand and all the greedy corporatists try to force as many fixtures as they possibly can. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of your number one commodity as an athlete, and that is your physical condition. So I'm going to do a little bit of the thing where I conflate Barcelona with the Spanish national team, but Liga F starts on September 8th. So hopefully some of these players get some time to rest, and obviously you have players who are not just for Barcelona. You have some on some other Liga F teams as well. So hopefully they're able to kind of get some rest before camp gets way too heavy. I'm sure all the managers over there are going to realize, maybe give these players some extra time to rest up. But you see Woso Twitter, and Twitter is for jokes ultimately, even though it's slowly turning into a bastion for misinformation and disinformation, but that's another podcast.
Slowly?
Twitter is namely a place for jokes. And, I underestimated how annoyed some people were or have been with Spain's success and perceived dominance. And some of that dominance, by the way, not perceived, because we've seen them play and they're great.
Totally.
But that's just what happens. When you're the big dog and you get knocked off your pedestal, a lot of jokes come flying your way. But let me give you this hot take. I think Spain's going to be fine.
I agree with that. Yeah, I was surprised to see all the NWSL Gold Cup faction and Euros Champions League faction kind of going at it, like around, whether it was Gurma or Beaumont or whoever. I also did a fun thought experiment. Liga F starts September 8th. Who would you pick? Let's say these teams play September 5th in like a friendly for some stakes. Let's say each player wins $100,000 for winning. An Orlando Pride making a push to the playoffs, cooking mid-season form, late season form, against a preseason form Barcelona.
Oof. I would pay to watch that match, I'll tell you that.
Let's get greedy and corporatist here. We gotta get into the chill derby. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, don't tell UEFA that I'll pay for that match. Don't tell FIFA that I'll pay for that match. They'll be like, how much? How much can we extract? I mean, you don't have
to make a pick. Just a thought exercise. It was just a thought exercise of like, hey, this would be interesting.
It would be extremely interesting, and I would want to watch it. And I think that's why Club World Cups pique the interest of every federation. The Champions League is one example, but that being just a UEFA thing, you always have. And we talked about it with Cam, I think the first time, Cam Pope from DAZN, we talked to him about it. I think the first time he came on, we were like, can we just drop Gotham FC in the Champions League? Can we just see what happens?
That would be incredible. Back to the football at hand. Spain, Germany, though. Anything else we need to know about this bronze medal matchup?
The Katakoi foul on Julia Givin. Bad foul. We've talked a lot about Katakoi as one of the better goalkeepers in the world. I think it's easy to underrate a great goalkeeper or an excellent goalkeeper on a great team because sometimes you don't see what that goalkeeper brings. I'll say, we've talked about it. Koi makes things a little exciting from time to time, but that was a bad foul on Givin. And I thought it was very cool to see Givin be the one who draws the foul and then buries the penalty. I thought that was great. And then on the other side, you cannot talk about DFB Frauen without talking about Ann-Katrin Berger in this tournament.
Wow.
Makes the save on the penalty pretty much at the death. You couldn't write it if you tried.
I mean, talk about a couple of heavyweights staring each other down on that one.
Awesome.
And shout out to, I don't want to skip over to Julia Givin. I mean, tremendous player.
Oh, yeah. Great.
She is so good. I mean, I cannot wait. I mean, I think between our guy, Chris Sharples, Vicey, watching this German side, kind of getting to know some of these players, I think Frauen Bundesliga it's just got to be on the docket, come fall. Would love to see some of those German teams, kind of make a little bit more noise this Champions League season. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ann-Katrin Berger, incredible tournament. I mean, what are you going to do? Like her form, I mean, you watched kind of like her first handful of games in the NWSL. You're like, this is insane. I mean, I think she had like 5 clean sheets or some ridiculous number. Talked to Vicey obviously before the tournament. Merle Froms goes out against Iceland, kind of craps the bed. Berger steps in, lights out, another big game keeper. I mean, I just love her profile athletically.
Yeah.
She just looks and moves and is built like an elite goalkeeper. And then she goes out and fucking actually does it. Like, incredible.
Yeah, man. And the smarts, the positioning, we talked about her passing ability. Vicey brought up the fact that she had 2 assists. They talked about it a little bit on the broadcast. This is a player who had to wait her turn for quite a while on the national team. And I mean, it just speaks to what that patience did for her and that she stayed ready. And then she comes up absolutely huge for the team, for her country, for her teammates, for Horst Hrubesch, whose name I can pronounce. If you watch the episode with Peter Weiss, I absolutely butcher it and then lose all confidence. Horst Hrubesch. I can say it. I know how to say his name. But
crushed it.
I digress. Berger comes up huge for everybody, and it's a legendary moment for her.
That moment where you see Alexia stepping up, and I'm just like, oh shit, this is trouble. And then the camera cuts to Berger's face, and I'm just like, Alexia's in trouble. You're not really expecting it, but stone face. And then actually like just stones the shot. I mean, just incredible. I think they deserved it. I mean, Spain's great. Oh yeah. And shout out to anybody out there who bet Spain not to medal in this tournament, which must have been 200 million to 1. Like, unbelievable that a team that loaded with talent was shut out of the podium. But I think, again, it just speaks to the quality and the evolution of the women's game, and just fucking great time to start a podcast because I think the game is only just going to keep exploding from here. All right, man. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
Let me do a couple more shout outs. So we talked about Blade Runner. We talked about Musaitama. Shout out to Michael T 6218 in the YouTube comments. I had posited the idea, is Alyssa Nair the greatest goalkeeper in the history of the U.S. women's national team? Michael had a really great synopsis, and I'm paraphrasing here. You should go back and check out the U.S. women's national team Brazil preview episode if you haven't. You could watch us be soothsayers and look at all the things we got right. But in there, Michael kind of frames Hope Solo as probably the most physically talented keeper, Brianna Scurry the most accomplished and the most important keeper in the history of the program, and then Nair kind of being a combination of both as a leader, as an athlete. So,
love that. Michael
T, shout out to you. Thought that was a really clever way you framed that. And then Jim Neal 1520 on YouTube asked us before this match if Marta was going to start. because, those young players for Brazil were cooking in Marta's absence. We saw Elias decided to bring Marta off the bench. And to your point earlier, it did not work really as well as I think he had hoped, but it was not the reason they lost, obviously. Like, I don't think the match doesn't hinge on Marta starting, but I thought that was just a good question and a good thing to be kind of pondering, and I think many people were. So shout out to you, Jim.
Absolutely. Yeah. A couple of those I want to shout out. Some of our OGs, MLS Architect, Boy Named Blue, Mad Dog, Philip Sullivan, Gretchen, Cali Texkin.
Let's go.
Guys are the best. I mean, everybody just keeps it coming. Takes are hot. I've got to read them and then kind of sit for a minute with them just because I think, they they definitely bend my brain and kind of help elevate what we're doing here. So please, please, please keep those coming. And with that said, I think we did it. We did it. We're taking home some hardware.
That's
It's been a marathon, man. It's been awesome covering the tournament with you. You already know I appreciate you. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you to my co-host and also to everybody who watches, listens, follows, likes, subscribes, and just plain hangs out with your boys. Remember to like if you liked and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review at your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. Big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grant Engel, for the incredible analysis, incredible predictions and prognostications. No drone needed. Now all we got to do is find a nice spot on our mantle for our nice, shiny, brand new gold medals. You already know what time it is. I appreciate you, bro.
Likewise, buddy. This has been awesome. Like covering everything with you. So we got through this. We got our medals. Now we're back to the NWSL. The WSL is coming back. Frauen Bundesliga, Liga F, and you already know the UEFA Women's Champions League is coming up sooner than some people might think. I believe the qualifications matches start in early September. So we're less than a month till the Champions League returns. So your boys will be locked in. Thank you, everybody.
My bad. Real quick, I need to give a shout out to all of our awesome guests in this tournament.
Oh, yeah, geez.
Bridie O'Toole, Julia Bellis-Tinadaj, Miriam Karabi from She Scores Bangers, Peter Vicey with the twofer, Samantha Lewis, Calvin Chikenge from Zambia, Philip Rollo from New Zealand. Tremendous appreciation for everybody who hopped on with us, helped us preview, helped us kind of fill in all these gaps. I mean, couldn't have done the show without everybody that came on and hung out with you boys.
Absolutely. I mean, think about we had boots on the ground. Julia Bellis-Trindade, like you mentioned, from Brazil, she was at the tournament covering it. Asil Tufile from Forbes covering it on the France contingent. Massive respect and gratitude to everybody who joined us. They're obviously all invited back, a part of the growing into the channel conglomerate worldwide.
The tentacles.
But the most important part of the organization, if you will, of course, all of you, thank you for checking out the videos. Thank you for commenting and keeping us honest, making sure you fact check us, dropping some knowledge for us, adding the extra context when we need it. We very much appreciate you. Let us know what leagues you're interested in. We're going to be trying to continue covering the whole gamut of leagues around the world. So thank you for rocking with us. Thank you for standing on the medal stand with us. Gold medals for all of you, no doubt. And we will talk to you next time.